Touch and go with the Grim Reaper. The stench of jet exhaust and scorched tires, and the deafening roar of a phantom just snatched out of the blackness, drift down the flight deck. Four sets of eyeballs return seaward, scanning the glide slope for the next triangle of lights above an unseen horizon. Geez, he's below the LSO-1 stopped short and keyed the UHF. 201, watch your altitude. The lights continued to settle slowly below the plane guard's masthead light. 201, watch your altitude. Don't go lower. Climb, pleaded LSO-1. Frustration, horror, and grief pervade the platform as the Phantom's lights are snuffed out half-mile behind the carrier, and then with them go the lives of its crew. Setting, the office of the Grim Reaper. Two aviators in wet flight gear. Reaper. Holy meatball lineup angle of attack. Let me guess, night CCA, yep, been getting a lot of you guys over the years. Can spot them a mile away. No pun intended. Pilot. I hardly think. Reaper. Yeah. Don't let me making light of your misfortune. Tell me, sport, anything mechanically wrong with that airplane you flew into the drink? Why, no, but... And Reaper to Rio. And you, young fella, I suppose you were just along for the ride? Rio protesting. No, sir, my instrument lights didn't. Reaper. Lights? Schmites. That doesn't change a thing, does it? You two flew into the water. Look, I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen more young, capable guys in front of me because of a moment's breakdown in instrument scan or just plain poor flight discipline. After witnessing so many ramp strikes and other senseless fatalities like your own, one just stops feeling sorry for the victims. You guys are responsible for your demise. Pilot. Well, I had a lot of help. Reaper. All right, self-righteous one. Let's hear your story. Aside. You can always tell a fighter pilot, but you can't tell them much. Pilot. In retrospect, I suppose the deck was stacked against us. But if I thought it would come to this, I'd have blown the whistle. The old can-do spirit got us, I guess. Reaper. How so? Pilot. Well, we started bouncing for this ref tray 26 nights ago, and my last three double FCLP periods having been the 7th, 9th, and 10th nights. Reaper. I'm confused. Get to the point. Pilot. What it boils down to is that I haven't had a night bounce period or a night hop in the past 17 days. I did all right at the boat yesterday and this morning, getting my 1 touch and go and 5 day traps, but that 17-day layoff sure caught up with me tonight. It wasn't like we weren't scheduled during that 17 days. In fact, we briefed 5 of the 9 preceding nights. Briefs started anywhere between midnight and 0200. Problem was, maintenance was strapped for parts. We were low supply priority 4 months prior to deployment. No jets, no fly. Reaper. Sounds grim. Pilot. To the tune of having only 1 or 2 up aircraft a night after a full day's schedule. Reaper. Did you bring this to somebody's attention? Pilot. Yeah. I talked to the ops officer, but I was preaching to the choir. No one was getting his periods flown, and there were more junior pilots than I who are understandably higher priority. You can hack it, the ops officer said. Of course I agreed. Boy, were we wrong. Reaper. The record is written in blood. Pilot. That's not all. The clincher was the bird we launched in had no instrument lights in the rear cockpit. Reaper. Bad idea. So young Rio here was along just for the ride. Pilot. Well, we didn't want to miss our overhead and have to come out to the ship again tomorrow night. I like being at home as much as the next guy. At least I used to. Reaper. Instrument lights, I don't understand how that alone. Pilot. It wasn't just that. It was typically all the wrong things happening at the right time. Reaper. How so? Pilot. Off a bolter, I established a good rate of climb towards 1,200 feet and then commenced my downwind turn, shifting attention to rollout heading, the beam position, etc., anticipating the next approach. Noticing that I had ballooned to 1,800 feet, I eased it down to 1,400 feet, my usual 1,200 feet plus 200 gravy. On base leg, the ship called for a descent to 600 feet for a surveillance approach, at which time the TACAN started spinning. The final bearing was also changing, so here we were in a rate of descent, turning inbound, looking outside for the ship and lineup lights. If that wasn't enough, remember ballooning to 1,800 feet? Yeah, make that 800. Yep. I misread the altimeter by 1,000 feet in my haste to turn downwind and preoccupation with everything else. My descent out of 1,400 for 600 was actually out of 400. Well, you know the rest. If only paddles could have called a few seconds earlier. Reaper. Famous last words. You know, phone rings. Excuse me. Reaper here. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They're right here in front of me. I see. Right away, sir. Hangs up the phone. You guys are in luck. I have it from higher up that you're going back and recover the aircraft at 200 feet when the LSO first called you. This is extraordinary, but it happens on occasion. Pilot, you mean Reaper? I mean, get your butt on the gauges, wave off, take that aircraft home. You get a good night's rest because you're going to finish calls tomorrow night. Oh, and while you're at it, why not share this experience with your cohorts? Pilot, roger that. Back on the platform. LSO1, wave it off 201. What's the problem? Catsy, 201, climb and maintain 1,200 feet. Upon reaching, turn left 270. 201. 201 is RTB for cockpit lighting failure. Catsy, roger 201, signal bingo, gear up, hook up, steer 282 for 78. 201, Wilco. The story above is fictitious where obvious. All other details are true. In fact, the LSO calls were received in time to avoid needless catastrophe. The author will be forever grateful to this service from the platform. There really isn't much I can say that is not evident in the previous reading, except circumstantial detail that carrier aviators will appreciate. Back in June of 1978, the America was cruising around in Whiskey 72, about 80 miles off the coast of Oceania, taking day and night overheads for Carqual. Attached to VF-103, my Rio Pudd'nhead and I took an aircraft that had no console lights in the rear cockpit. Frankly, the lights had little to do with our near disaster, but rather the fact that Catsy's Spin 49 radar was out meant I would have to line up for the final bearing using the drop lights. This was a formula for disaster because it invites both of us to be outside the cockpit when Pudd'nhead should have been hawking the instruments and I should have had the sense to direct his attention there. A very timely and emphatic call from the platform brought me to recognize the imminent horrifying danger. At the 45 descending towards 200 feet, I ballooned the aircraft up, noting the ball coming up from the bottom of the lens, red to yellow and off the top, before paddles waved me off. I was in no frame of mind to continue that night, so we declared RTB for cockpit lighting failure. I chose not to tell my wife the next morning about what had happened at the boat, because I didn't want her to know how perilously close I'd come to death. I even waited until I left VF-103 before I wrote the article, as directed by the Reaper, and submitted it, since if published, might reflect poorly on VF-103. Imagine my surprise 24 years later in 2005 when the 50th anniversary issue of Approach reprinted Touch and Go as a reflection of the first 50 years. Perhaps I'm not alone in getting goosebumps reading this article. It's an interesting issue of Approach, and I have attached a link if you would like to read more of the entries in the magazine. As a postscript, I will add that my father, Lawrence Heyworth Jr., was the commissioning skipper of the America in January 1965. What a chilling irony if I had flown into the water that night.